Welcome to Talk Tantra to Me. It is such an honor to be holding space for this divine knowledge to make its way into your ears and lifestyle. So today I'm going to be talking about a little bit of a vulnerable topic. I'm going to be sharing some things that have been happening in my personal life and the lessons that are being birthed from that, and kind of just approaching, challenges in our lives and sharing ways to reframe these challenges. So to me, what this comes down to is looking at our pain points, unexpected traumas as initiations rather than as these events that we're the victim of. It's shifting that perspective from victim to conscious creator, which is incredibly powerful and empowering for us as humans. So another way to look at these experiences are soul assignments or initiations. I personally prefer the term initiation, especially in terms of what's been happening in my life right now. And the one way that I like to look at these experiences, is from, I don't remember where I got this concept, so I can't give clear credit, but it was some podcast I was listening to, and it might have been Mel Wells, and she was interviewing someone, and it was someone that she interviewed that said this, I think, and it was something along the lines of the fact that spirit can't just conjure a lion in the city of 3 million people that you live in the same way that we hear about initiations in ancient times and in biblical times, etc. So it's this idea that okay, spirit can't conjure a lion or throw you in a river or have some spirit come talk to you at the CVS store, you know what I mean? So instead we call in or spirit places other difficult situations in our lives that serve as initiations, including diagnosis, natural disaster, other sort of insane, experiences, fires, loved ones having issues, death, etc. And that's what I'm going to be approaching today. This idea of seeing these experiences as great initiations. So for those of you that follow my Instagram, recently, some of you guys might be listening far in the future, and that's why I'm going to give kind of the background of what's been happening in my life. So about a month ago, I started to experience some interesting sensations in my womb space, some phantom pains, irregular bleeding, also just feeling very withdrawn from the world and very intuitive, and feeling I needed lots more time than normal to be in my own energy, to create space for myself, to meditate. I was also having really weird dreams that I had given birth, which has never happened before, dreams I was helping other women give birth, dreams of women, medicine women, shaman working on my stomach and explaining things to me almost as if they were teaching me something. And what was coming through in those dreams, because I would have moments of those dreams where I would become lucid. I've had periods of my life where I have a lot of lucid dreams, and they tend to be around big transformative moments in my life, big initiatory moments in my life. And what tends to happen when I become lucid in those dreams is I get really excited because I can sense that something big is happening. And that kind of tends to draw me out of the experience. So actually, when I was in those moments in these recent dreams, I consciously chose to stop the lucidity and to go back into the dream so that I wouldn't rock myself out with the excitement of the fact that I was lucid. But the point is that I was having all of these crazy things happening. And I just got this intuitive hit of go to the gynecologist. You need to go to the gynecologist. And if you know me, I'm someone that really avoids Western doctors, Western medicine as much as possible. It's a personal choice. There's a whole other story behind why that is. Long story short, I have, enlisted Western care, Western preventative care, and Western treatment for various issues in the past. And by and far, it's created more negative impact for me overall. And I even think that some of the issues that I'm experiencing currently are lingering effects of birth control. But that's just an intuitive hit. There's no way for me to prove that for sure, other than the fact that many women that have IUDs, for example, experience a lot of the symptoms that I'm having in this moment. That being said, I was having all these things happen, and like, I wasn't in a lot of pain. Like, irregular bleeding isn't that uncommon for women, so it's not something that you would normally schedule a gynecologist appointment for or need to. But I was just like, I'm gonna get in just to make sure. And so I reached out to my homeopathic doctor here, and she gave me the name of a gyno, and she says they're very like Western, but I like this woman's energy. Just whatever they say, take it with a grain of salt, but come see me after if they give you a diagnosis. So I got very lucky that this gynecologist had a month-long waiting period to normally get in to see her. But I happened to be very lucky that she had a cancellation, so I could get in like within a few days. And, I can tell that this is going to be a different, gynecologist visit, but I'm always a little bit anxious about going to the gynecologist. But as I'm going in, I'm constantly seeing like angel numbers everywhere I'm going, and just feeling like something's happening. Even my valet ticket was 999, which is the number of transformation, the number of completing a cycle and going into like a new life path. And so I go in, and she takes a look, she does a pap, she does a sonogram on my womb. And she's like, at first she wasn't very concerned. She was like, it's probably a cyst. Cysts aren't that big of a deal. I've had cysts before. I've had cyst rupture before. It's not a fun experience. It's not painful, but I've done it before. So I was like, okay, like, she's not that worried about it. I'm not that worried about it. Great. But then she goes in and measures. She's like, it confirms it is a cyst. She's like, this looks like a big one. She measures it. It's the size of a tennis ball. And she's like, ooh, okay. So we normally recommend surgery for this, type of cyst. We're going to wait though and monitor. We want to give it some time to see if things are shifting, etc. She knows that I came on the recommendation of this homeopath. She says it's not common that these cysts go away on their own. It's usually a surgery sort of situation, but go to your homeopath, see what they recommend. It's not like we need to rush you in, but I want you back here in 2 weeks to take another look and to schedule. And she said, if it gets any bigger, we're going to have to schedule surgery, but let's give it these 2 weeks. So I was really upset about this news. Not super stoked. In deep trust, but was also very concerned about my fertility, very concerned about the possibility of having to do surgery. I've never, knock on wood, where's some wood? Knock on wood. I've never had to have surgery before. And just also, the fact of I'm in a new city. I've been here for a few months. I don't have I'm very grateful to have met some incredible people and to have some great friends here, but I can't say that I have that, like, the depth of friendship that you can only have with the longevity of a friendship. So, I'm concerned about that. If I have to get surgery in a city where I don't really know anyone super well, and just like not having someone, like, hearing this news and not having someone to go and hug was also just like, I just need a hug in this moment, so that was a bit challenging for me. And then also just being an entrepreneur and having a super busy schedule and feeling like a lot of responsibility to show up for my clients and my community, while also trying to like hold space for myself in the process that I was in. So it was definitely just this moment of like, okay, like I really need to rethink some things. And like my mindset very quickly had to shift, which is such an initiation, right? And there were moments of deep trust, and there were moments of like, oh my God, I have cancer. And like, you know, because a few other symptoms started to pop up that were very concerning to me. But, you know, to kind of speed things along, on a physical level, I initiated all of the healing modalities that I felt would be of use, including going to my homeopath. She got me on a pretty great regimen. She got me connected with her Chinese medicine doctor who did acupuncture cupping and also gave me some herbs and additional supplements. I did a womb healing with a dear sister here in Austin, Tarani, and who will also be on the podcast in a few weeks. I'm interviewing her as well. You know, massage, like infrared sauna, did an Akashic record reading and asked the Akashic records what was going on. And kind of the consensus that I was getting, you know, from the energy workers that I was enlisting and the downloads that I was getting myself, was this idea of like real frustration with the stifling of the feminine energy, which is kind of a symptom of patriarchy. And while I consider myself a feminist in many ways, I also don't feel like I align 100% with the feminist ideologies, especially the more extremist side. I tend to see feminine and masculine as the energies that they are, that we all have within us. And when I was doing kind of my self-assessment of what was going on, I recognized that there was this very clear pattern of disruption between my inner masculine and feminine, in that there was equally this part of my feminine that was trying to dom my masculine and not allowing my dom to create the spaciousness for my feminine to express. And also there was this element that was manifesting in that it almost felt like my feminine was taking over all of the responsibility, which was keeping her from really being in the magic of her expression, including the fact that like I'm very creative and very feminine, but it was almost like I was trying to put a lot of pressure on the production that came with that, so that all of my creative expression needed to have a reason, or needed to have some output that made my business grow, or made me look good on social media, or, you know, created more paths of abundance. Like there was no space to just like be as much. Even the beingness was, you know, I needed to have a reason, right? And so I was doing a lot of energy work around that aspect as well in this space. So, you know, lots of fear, lots of, you know, scarcity. On top of this, I also don't have health insurance, which is a conscious choice. I can afford it at this point, but to me, I don't trust the industry. I don't like the industry. And I choose not to invest my money in something that I don't feel in alignment with. Simple as that. That being said, in circumstances like this, you know, having insurance is great. And I haven't had insurance since I was in my early 20s. I never went on my own private insurance after I got off my parents' insurance. I was traveling abroad. I actually couldn't afford insurance at the time. And then, you know, when I could, I reassessed that situation and realized I actually am not in alignment with this. I'd rather just spend my money on holistic care, which is what I've done. And I have no regrets. Even in this circumstance, I still have no regrets. And I intend to stick with my plan of not having health insurance. But that being said, it did create, okay, like if I have to get surgery, there's like the scarcity element that's coming in. And just generally speaking, there were all of these pieces that were creating lots of questioning and lots of opportunity for me to look within and get clear on what limiting beliefs and fear I was carrying, and where I could surrender, lean into trust, and create space for a miracle. And it's interesting, I actually almost recorded a very similar podcast to this in September last August, I also had a really tough month of initiations. And in some ways, it was an even bigger initiation than what's been happening now. That month, there was a big fire in my apartment complex, totaled my car, very just like scary situation. Like, how crazy is like a fire and then like no cause? To this day, they still don't know what caused this fire. Wild initiation. Like, what an example of like, we couldn't conjure the lion, so here's a fire. you know um and then a few months or a few weeks after that, 2 weeks after that, my dear best friend dog Stuart went into the emergency hospital and was like on his deathbed, and literally the doctor was like, he's dying, what do you want us to do? Like, here are last ditch effort options. He's getting bad really fast, so we don't know if it's like a few days, if it's a week, if it's hours. So like, what are your wishes for your dog on his deathbed? And like, talk about grief beyond imagination. I didn't know it was possible to feel so much grief at that time. I had, suicidal thoughts coming up, which I have had a history of depression and anxiety that I've mostly cleared up in the process of working with Tantra and spirituality and finding my purpose and my path. And some of those things started to resurface in those moments of intense grief, and in those moments also had some incredible lessons, and they're very parallel in this space, and that is just love. Despite all of these awful, scary situations, in this moment now, and in that moment, in those moments last year when I was having those other traumatic experiences, I never felt more love. I've never felt more trust, more abundance. Yes, there were moments of fear and anxiety and lack mindset, but guess what? Half of surrender is feeling these uncomfortable emotions and then letting them go one at a time, softening, trusting, this too shall pass. And my introduction to spirituality was very much in the space of like love and light and say your affirmations and like think positive thoughts and like, don't, as soon as you have a negative thought, push it away. Don't let that happen because negative thoughts create more, and that's the law of attraction, etc. And I think that that's a great like window in. There's a lot of value in that, and I really appreciate that as the entry to into my journey. However, as I've come full circle, I've recognized that it's not complete for me. And I think that each individual has to decide personally if that's in resonance with their highest truth. And for me, I found that it's really important to go into my full emotional expression and to grieve and to consider the worst case scenario, to allow myself to imagine, well, what will it mean for me if my dog dies? What will it mean for me if they have to remove my ovary, or if I have cancer, or if I lose my fertility? What does that look like? And to allow myself to grieve that possibility, to fully feel the emotions, to get emotionally clear, to let it all go, so that when it's time for me to come into my love and light and trust, I've let that go. I've processed it. I've become emotionally current, so I can become a stronger magnet for the miracle that is possible. So to me, you can feel both. You can feel the love and trust while also experiencing the human emotions of grief. And sometimes they can be simultaneous, and sometimes it's like a yo-yo. But I think that for me, it's really important to allow yourself to feel all of that, to be in the human. And in the lineages of Tantra and spirituality that I've studied and I've really found my path within, the teachings kind of have this shared resonance in that the more you open yourself up to love, you are inversely opening yourself up to immense pain. So in the case of my dog, when I got my dog, I got him because I wanted to feel that unconditional love that many of us really only feel from our pets, purely and truly. At the same time, I also knew that there would come a day where our paths would separate because death is inevitable, whether it was me or him first. Most likely it'll be him, but I don't know. There will come a day where there is that loss, that there's that pain. So as I'm opening myself up to the potential of love, I'm inversely and equally opening myself up to the path of pain. Other Buddhist Tantra teachers say that the more wild and unstable the world is, the better conditions for spiritual growth and remembrance. You can use these crazy conditions happening around you as an initiation into your highest self, into more expansive timelines. Chaos can be an invitation to transformation. It is a divine dichotomy, a hilarious contradiction when you really think about it. And you think about like the times of COVID and like all of the craziness that's been happening the past few years. Holy shit, how many people around you have been waking up? Look at where you were 3 years ago. Talk about a quantum leap for me personally. Maybe you resonate, maybe you don't. Maybe you're at the beginning of that quantum leap. Hard to say. But I think that it's immensely brave to say, I am willing to take the risk to get to know myself and the world on a deeper level by opening myself up to the abundant and infinite potential of love, which is inversely opening myself up to the infinite and abundant nature of loss and pain and grief. And this dichotomy is the essence of these initiations. Was what I was feeling the last couple of weeks as I was processing the potential of what was going to happen with my body, and feeling this sense of like, almost like, I almost felt like my body was like a foreign object, or like I've always had like a very close relationship with my body, and I felt like blindsided or like stabbed in the back, which is super dramatic, but that's honestly how it felt in some ways. And to learn to lean back into trust and to see like, no, this is a message from my body. My body is communicating to me, and what an opportunity this is to learn more about my body. And that's really what my homeopath said. God bless my homeopath, because what a sweetheart. So calm, cool, and collected, so positive. She was like, this is so powerful for you. You're going to learn so much about your body. Look into the myths of Persephone. She goes into the underworld. That's what you're doing right now. And I mean, even my Chinese medicine doctor was like, you're probably going to need surgery. So I was like, ooh, but she was very much like, this is great. And honestly, so were, others on my path in the more energetic space. Tyranny, who did my womb healing. I had a couple of other dear friends that were doing sort of energy work on me in this time, that were also, very positive and optimistic. And I'm really grateful to have had those support systems, and my friends and family, of course, too, and all of the people on social media sending me so much love. And that's what I mean, that like, even in these moments of challenge, I never felt more love around me. Like every day, having people check in and say, hey, how are you doing today? Like, just want to make sure you're doing all right. Like sending love, sending prayers, holding out for the best possible outcome. And to me, like, that was just such a gift to see the love around me. And if you're going through something similar right now, regardless of the type of initiation it is, I definitely want to encourage you to open yourself up to the potential of receiving. I know for myself, my conditioning and my patterns very much were in the space of don't ask for help, don't show your weakness. Like 3 years ago, I for sure would not have been putting that stuff on social media. But I did. I wanted to be real and authentic about what was happening in my life, and to use it as an opportunity to be really vulnerable and to encourage other people to be really vulnerable, and also to share the potential of also to share the experiences of women, because I think that a lot of women deal with womb complications and feel like they need to be quiet about them because that's what our conditioning teaches us from a young age. Like we're hiding our tampons as we're like, going to the restroom at school, for example. So just creating spaciousness for women to talk about these things, and for men or people that don't have vulvas or womb spaces to familiarize themselves with what the other half of the demographic of this planet witnesses in their bodies. And on top of that, to create spaciousness for people to witness alternative healing modalities too, because that was a big part of my journey, as I've spoken into. So just understanding that like this created so much spaciousness for love to flow in. While I was experiencing this pain, there was this equal opposite experience of love. And I also want to speak into a little bit deeper this element of like coming to terms with the reality of what's happening. Because excuse me, just having a sip of tea here. My experience with a lot of like holistic wellness, and like when you get a diagnosis that's scary, it's often just like, don't think about the worst case scenario, like you're going to get better, like you're on this path to healing, etc. And while I think that's great, I also think that there's a lot of power in just owning the worst case scenario and allowing yourself to feel that. And I kind of think that if you allow yourself to envision the worst case scenario, that's where you meet the depth of the initiation. It's almost as if when you allow your mind to process the worst case scenario, your body experiences it too on some level. And in that way, it's almost as if you experienced it, which means that maybe you don't need to actually follow that timeline because energetically and mentally you experienced it. And this is like a bit esoteric and a bit woo-woo, but interestingly, in the experience with my dog, I remember the day that he was getting worse and getting worse, and I kept being like, he's gonna get better though. I know he's gonna get better. I know he's gonna get better. And then the one day that I went in, it was like day 3, I went into the vet and they were like, yeah, we need to know his end of life plan. He's like kind of, he's dying. Like, we're not saying like he's dead, but like that's the path that we're following. He's not getting better. We don't know what else to do, and when I went, I was broken. And when I went home that day, I remember getting into the bath and finally allowing myself to face the very real possibility that I might be losing like the greatest love of my life up to this point, still to this day, greatest love of my life. And maybe you understand this if you're a pet owner, maybe you think I'm a crazy dog lady. But nothing will ever replace my relationship that I have with this dog. And to me, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that my relationship to love is that it's infinite and expansive, and it comes in all these different shapes and qualities. And loving one person or thing doesn't take away from the potential to love another person or thing. So like, for example, I can't compare the love to my dog to the love that I'll have for my future life partner, my future children. They're just completely different qualities. But in that moment that I got into the bath and was processing the potential of losing the greatest love of my life, it was deeply healing and deeply profound. And I took that moment to think about like, what would that look like? What would that look like? Like, how would I honor the relationship that I had with this incredibly beautiful soul that I had the gift of spending 5 years with, who gave me so many beautiful initiations. And I got down to the point of like planning his doggy funeral. Like talking end of life, imagining a party in the canyons of LA where our favorite trail was. I would bury him and we'd all wear rainbow, and like, I'd plant a banana plant. I'd bury him and then plant a banana plant over his body to, get the nourishment, just like wild. And it was the very next day that he started getting better. And I don't think that was a coincidence. I think because I processed that possibility of him dying, he didn't need to die because I went through the initiation internally. And then in the experience I'm going through now, I experienced the grief of like, what would it mean if I lost fertility in one ovary, and what would it mean if I had to do surgery? And I even got to the point that I was like, maybe I do need surgery, and maybe that's the lesson. Like maybe this is an opportunity for me to face my fear of surgery, you know, and to get more comfortable with my womb space and to have foreigners in my womb space, because as you had heard, I was having all these dreams about babies and giving birth and helping other women give birth. And for the last year, which is like a whole other story, I've been feeling really called to work with women in the birthing space. And it started with a dear, beautiful client of mine being pregnant. And it was my first pregnant client, and being with her on her journey and having several friends around me getting pregnant. And then, you know, visiting the temples of Hathor in Egypt and going into the birthing chambers there and getting these intense downloads of like past lives of doing this work. And so I've been building up to that. And so I was like, well, maybe I need this surgery, because that would be a bit of a birth in some ways. Maybe birthing a new version of myself. And, you know, so I got to the point that I was like, maybe that's what I need. I don't know. So let me go into that space and feel into it. So I allowed myself to fully grapple with the possibility of what could happen. And then fast forward, I go to the doctor, go back to the doctor. And this was yesterday. Although this podcast is coming out this weekend, I think. So, you know, different timelines happening here. But I went to the doctor and I was super nervous. I knew that if the cyst was bigger, they were going to push for surgery. I knew that if it was the same size, we were going to have some more conversations. It would mean, is the holistic stuff working? Is it not? You know, it would mean further anxiety and further stress into this space. And I also knew that I couldn't expect for it to get smaller, because even my homeopath was like, this is not an overnight sort of journey. This is going to take probably at least months for it to get smaller, and more months for it to go away entirely, if that's the path that ends up, you know, following out. So I was expecting, I was hoping that it would stay the same or get a little bit smaller, and praying that it wouldn't get bigger. And what do you know? My gyno was shocked. The cyst shrunk 30%. It went from 3 inches in diameter to 2.2 inches, about 30%. And she was like, this is amazing. She was like, this is very rare that it would get smaller at all. And like, for it to go down this much is just like beautiful. Keep doing what you're doing. And she's like, come back in 3 weeks. We'll see. We want to keep monitoring this, but this is a really good trend. So obviously not out of the doghouse, but like, what celebration? This is amazing. Like, what a miracle. And it was really beautiful. Last week, I did an oracle spread with my Divine Feminine deck. I have a few different oracle decks. Oracle decks, if you're not familiar, are kind of like tarot cards. But they're a little bit more, tarot can have positive and negative meanings. Oracles are, generally speaking, all pretty positive. And they're just great tools to like get some insight from your highest self, from your guides, to just take some time to reflect. And so I did an oracle pull, and I pulled this card, and I've been getting this woman a lot, and I actually can't remember. So in this Divine Feminine deck, each of the cards is a different goddess or priestess or spiritual woman of the times, like Mary Magdalene, Joan of Arc, Green Tara, Sekhmet, etc. And I actually can't remember the name of it was a nun that I pulled. Um, and her name was, I know her, the first name was Catherine, and she was from France. But essentially, in her lifetime, she channeled Mary Magdalene very often, or not Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary. She channeled Mother Mary, and Mother Mary has been a big guide for me in the past few months. I went to her resting place in Turkey when I was there in the fall, and I got this necklace that I'm wearing now. If you're watching the video on YouTube, you can see it. And I had this really interesting experience, spiritual experience, when I was at her resting place. I'm not going to go into the specifics because to me, that's one of those sacred pieces that I want to keep close, but it's just a very powerful experience. And so when I pulled this card from the deck, I pulled this woman, this nun, Catherine, who was known for channeling Mother Mary, meaning Mother Mary would speak through her and give her ideas and guidance. And in this lifetime, this nun got this download to create these necklaces that are literally just like the necklace that I'm wearing right now. And they called them healing medallions or something like that. Miracle medallions, I think, is what they were called. And the affirmation at the bottom of the card said, I choose healing. I am worthy of the miracles meant for me. And I was like, oh my God, it's exactly what I needed to hear right now. So I've been repeating that affirmation in my head. And the cool thing is again, I've been pulling this card like over and over again for months, probably as this cyst was just like growing inside of me. I'm continuously pulling this card and being like, what does this mean? I don't understand. Like, I honestly was getting frustrated about pulling the card, and I kind of stopped using the deck for a minute because I was just like, kind of like, I don't feel in sync with this deck. When in reality, I kept pulling this card because I needed to be leaning into these miracles. So you never know what miracle is just around the corner, right? Or what miracle is desiring to present itself based on the initiation that's happening in your life. And so that was a really powerful moment for me as well. So anyways, come full circle. I'm on the healing, I'm on the mend, things are great. But just touching in on this final piece of these initiations of leaning into the love, in Tantra, unconditional love is associated with the heart chakra and the element of air. When we think about air, it's like air is so similar to love, and it's like so abundant and it's infinite and it's all around us. And it's not something that we can like really measure in totality, and we can't like grab onto air, and we can't grab onto love. You can't really like quantify it or like see it with your bare eyes. Like, can't see air, but we can see the evidence of air, like in the wind, right? Or in the quality of the air on our skin. And it's the same about love. We can see evidence of love all around us. The old couple holding hands, or the mother and the child, right? We can see that evidence all around. We can feel it, can certainly feel it. And when you're in your highest love, you naturally trust. When you feel the abundance and infinite nature of love, you feel safe, and you express yourself fully and emotionally, and you trust that no matter what happens, you are loved by yourself and by the universe. And no matter what happens, it is in the highest love for you. So even if my dog died, or I had to get surgery, or the fire that was spread into my apartment and got even worse than totaling my car and creating a lot of headache, like trusting that like there is some piece of love in this, and that there is an opportunity. So big activations, big initiations, big soul assignments. I'm super grateful. And I just want to encourage all of you guys to lean into this opportunity to see things in this different way. And I want to touch very briefly into one last piece. I wasn't going to go into this, but I'm feeling called to it. Oftentimes when we have these initiations or soul assignments, they also tend to get wrapped up with some element of finances. And I have a whole other episode of my podcast about abundance and the frequency of money. I highly recommend you check out that episode if you're feeling called. Let me see if I can pull up the episode number quickly to let you guys know where to find that. But I wanted to speak into this because just the way that our world is and our dependence on money can really put a lot of strain on ourselves when we're in these situations. So I'm having a hard time finding the episode. Okay, it's episode 33. Abundance Mindset and the Frequency of Money, episode 33, if you're interested in diving deeper into this topic, but I am just going to go very, very briefly into this piece. So you have this strain that often happens. And for me, when my car got totaled, it was like, oh my God, I need to buy a new car now. Super stressful. When my dog was in the hospital, it was $11,000 for my dog in the vet. And at that point, like, I was just able to afford that. If that experience had happened 6 months prior, I wouldn't have been able to afford that vet bill. Now going into the situation of like, okay, I need to invest thousands of dollars into holistic care and out of pocket visits to the gynecologist, and I might have to get surgery, which is going to be God knows how much. You can understand how this can show up, and this can be really stressful for people. And I just want to speak into this point of creating space for miracles to come through in those moments. And also recognizing that when you are investing in these investments out of force, there's usually not another option. It's recognizing the awareness that you then get to become the embodiment of someone that is able to invest that much into something that they deeply care about or is deeply in alignment with themselves, which is really powerful. For me, it was also a lesson, especially when things were happening with my dog, because the month before everything happened with my dog, I had my most abundant month ever thus far. And interestingly, the same thing happened this time too. February was my most abundant month ever. March, I get this cyst. And I'm like, fuck, like I just made all this money. Now it's gonna have to go towards this other thing, right? But it's recognizing that, cool, like I get to spend this money on my health and wellness. I get to spend this money on my dog that I'm deeply in love with. And it's creating more motivation for me to become even more abundant now, because I never want to be in a situation where I have to consider the possibility of not doing what I need to do to get my dog healthy and well, not doing what I need to do to get myself healthy and well. Right? So that was also a really big shift for me, especially when things happened with my dog. That was like a big shift, because at that time I was like, wow, I made a lot of money and I'm really grateful. And at the same time, what is this all for? Like, maybe I could work half of the amount that I'm working now and be a lot happier. Like, I don't know. But in reality, I learned that no, like, I actually am motivated to find more ways to serve more people and to serve myself in that way as well. And that was a really powerful activation and expansion for me in terms of abundance. And, interestingly, like as soon as I got this diagnosis, I didn't say, I'm not gonna, oh my God, I need to save all my money because I might have to get surgery. I'm gonna stop spending money. No, I actually ended up investing in a doula program. And I, invested thousands of dollars in womb healings and acupuncture and like all the other things. I actually invested more. And it was the same when things happened with Stuart. The first day Stuart was back, I remember I invested in another program that was all about like, business development. And I was like, okay, cool. I want to get more clear on like how I can do this even better because I had this motivation. So it might not seem wise based on the potential lack, but I choose to live my life based on the capacity of abundance and the belief that money is an energy and that I can call in more. So again, take a listen to episode 33 of the podcast if you are, interested in diving deeper into the money mindset piece of this. That being said, the main takeaway of this episode is to trust in the divine plan, to be able to see these challenging moments as initiations or as possible soul assignments, things that are there to help you unlock higher timelines when you're able to find the silver lining and lean in. So I'm going to leave it at that today. I also just want to take this moment to open my door. If you're going through something similar, or maybe not similar to my situation directly, but something that you recognize is very clearly a soul assignment or initiation that you are struggling with, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, to share your story, to ask for advice, etc. You know, I feel very grateful to be of service and to have had the mentors and the guides that have helped me come into a place where I'm able to zoom out from these circumstances and find that more expansive, trust and love based approach. And I'm happy to offer some resources and suggestions to help you as well, free resources and suggestions. And on top of that, I'm also happy to open my door to you, in a longer term container that's more tailored to your direct, needs and opportunities for growth and your challenges. And if you're interested in working with me in that capacity, you can visit www.talktantratome.com/work with me, and I'm more than happy to offer those resources for you there as well, and to kind of listen to your story and to get a sense of if my services overlap with the expansion that you're desiring, and we can kind of create a tailored approach in that way. I also do host events in the Austin area, sometimes other places, but right now I'm based in Austin. So definitely, reach out if you're interested in getting more in depth with that. And then I also do offer in-person body work, and Tantra ceremonies with men, women, and couples. And that might be a great piece for you as well. So definitely reach out if any of those offerings resonate with you. So before signing off today, I want to express my gratitude to you, the listener, once more. Thank you for opening yourself up to the idea of sacred sexuality. And if this podcast resonates with you, I'd love to hear it in the reviews. It means the world to me to hear your perspective on this beautiful awakening. And if you'd like to take an even more proactive role in awakening the collective to sacred sexuality, I'd love it if you screenshotted this podcast and shared it on your social media. And if you do so, please tag me so that I can thank you personally. With so much gratitude and love, have a sexy and spiritual day. And I'll catch you next week on Talk Tantra to Me. Ta-ta.